I'll say just one thing. Get ready, because Texas geography is far more extreme, far more strategic, and far more influential than you think. And by the final fact, you'll understand exactly why Texas doesn't just sit on the map, it shapes it. 22. Texas touches more ecosystems than almost any place in America. Most people think of Texas as either dusty desert or endless pasture, but the reality is far more complex. Texas sits at the crossroads of deserts, forests, plains, wetlands, and even mountains, allowing multiple biomes to overlap inside one state line. Drive west and you hit arid basins that resemble New Mexico. Travel east and you'll enter dense pine forests that feel more like Alabama. Move south and you'll hit humid coastal marshes and subtropical wetlands, while central Texas transitions into rolling hill country and grasslands. Few places in the U.S. combine this much environmental variety in one continuous landmass. And that diversity affects everything from wildlife to agriculture to weather. 21. Texas has its own mountain range. Most people don't picture Texas with mountains. Hidden in far west Texas, the Guadalupe Mountains rise sharply from the desert, forming the highest natural point in the state. But what makes them extraordinary isn't just elevation, it's origin. These peaks are ancient reef formations, built when Texas was submerged beneath a prehistoric sea filled with coral and marine life. Over millions of years, uplift and erosion exposed that ancient reef, leaving jagged white cliffs and rugged ridges behind. This means Texas geography doesn't just stretch wide across the continent, it reaches deep into geological time. 20. Texas controls a massive share of America's coastline. Texas isn't landlocked the way people assume. Its Gulf Coast runs for hundreds of miles, making it longer than the coastline of many entire states. This coast includes barrier islands that shield inland wetlands, estuaries that support rich fisheries, and ports that anchor international shipping routes. Warm Gulf waters influence weather systems, feed hurricanes, and shape migration patterns, connecting Texas to global atmospheric cycles. Economically, this coastline powers petrochemical hubs, energy terminals, and one of the busiest port networks in America. Quietly, Texas's coast ties the state to both global trade and global climate. 19. Texas contains one of the largest underground water systems in the world. The most important geography in Texas is invisible. Beneath central Texas lies the Edwards Aquifer, an underground reservoir that supplies drinking water to millions of people, supports agriculture, and sustains critical ecosystems. Entire cities, including San Antonio, Austin, and countless smaller communities, exist where they do because this aquifer lies below them. Springs emerge from the aquifer's limestone layers, feeding rivers that remain cold and clear even in summer. Without this hidden water system, modern Texas would look entirely different. Fewer people, fewer farms, fewer cities. 18. Texas sits on ancient seabeds. Texas was once underwater. Much of the state's bedrock was formed when warm, shallow seas covered the region during the Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras. Those seas left behind vast layers of limestone, composed of compacted shells, coral, and marine organisms. That same limestone filters minerals out of water, strengthens soil for agriculture, and provides raw materials for construction and industry. The result? Human development in Texas, from farming practices to city foundations, still rests on the legacy of an ocean that vanished millions of years ago. 17. Texas has deserts that rival the Southwest. This feels like Arizona, but it's Texas. In the far western reaches of the state, the Chihuahuan Desert spreads across rugged basins and mesas, bringing scorching heat, sparse rainfall, and dramatic elevation changes. This environment shaped early ranching culture, forced settlements to cluster near scarce water sources and influenced transportation routes that had to avoid impassable terrain. The desert isn't empty. It's ecological pressure that forged resilient communities and hardened systems. 16. Texas experiences some of the most extreme weather contrasts on Earth. Snow and heat can coexist here. Because Texas spans multiple climate zones, it routinely absorbs cold Arctic air in the north, while drawing in warm, humid air from the Gulf in the south. This creates an environment where freezing temperatures, triple-digit heat, drought, thunderstorms, and hurricanes can all occur within the same year, and sometimes within the same week. Tornado Alley cuts across the Texas Panhandle, while the Gulf Coast braces for tropical storms. Central Texas endures extreme droughts followed by flash floods as baked soil fails to absorb sudden rainfall. Texas geography doesn't stabilize weather, it amplifies it, making the state a laboratory for atmospheric conflict. 15. Texas is larger than entire countries. This isn't a metaphor. Texas covers 268,596 square miles, making it larger than France, larger than Germany, and larger than the United Kingdom. Driving from El Paso in the west to Texarkana in the east can take over 12 hours without significant stops, a distance comparable to driving from New York to Chicago and partway back. These distances change how people build infrastructure, distribute goods, and form cultural identities. Towns operate like small islands separated by vast stretches of land, and regional systems evolve independently. In Texas, distance itself becomes a defining geographic force. 14. Texas has rivers that decide borders. Geography literally drew political lines here. The Rio Grande forms a natural boundary for hundreds of miles along the southern edge of Texas, separating the United States from Mexico. But the river doesn't remain static. It shifts course, meanders, and cuts new channels over time, forcing legal disputes and political negotiations for generations. Smaller rivers such as the Red River also define boundaries and influence settlement patterns. In Texas, flowing water isn't just part of the landscape. It is a tool of diplomacy, a source of economic access, and a force that shapes how the map looks. 13. Texas contains one of the most important wind corridors in North America. Energy follows geography. The open plains of West Texas create a natural wind corridor where consistent high-speed air currents move across flat terrain unobstructed. What was once considered empty cattle country is now home to vast wind farms that generate a significant portion of America's renewable energy. Transmission lines carry power across the state, feeding cities and industry. Texas didn't become a wind energy giant through policy alone. The land itself made the industry viable. Geography generates power before technology harnesses it. 12. Texas has forests most people don't expect. This doesn't look like the Wild West. In East Texas, dense pine forests dominate the landscape, creating ecosystems that resemble Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama more than the stereotypical desert imagery associated with Texas. These forests support timber industries, wildlife habitats, and a humid subtropical climate that produces abundant rainfall. Just a few hundred miles away, the land transforms into grassland and desert. This sharp contrast illustrates that Texas isn't a singular ecosystem. It is a patchwork of identities held together by state lines rather than environmental logic. 11. Texas has one of the largest cave systems in the U.S. Texas geography goes underground again. Limestone bedrock beneath large portions of the state dissolves slowly over time, creating karst terrain filled with sinkholes, caverns, and subterranean rivers. Some of these cave networks stretch for miles and contain unique species found nowhere else on Earth. Beyond ecology, these underground formations influence engineering, groundwater storage, land stability, and urban planning. Entire communities must account for what lies beneath them. In Texas, the most complex geography often exists out of sight. 10. Texas sits on some of the richest oil-bearing formations on Earth. This changed everything. The Permian Basin in West Texas contains geological formations that have produced staggering volumes of oil and natural gas, fueling economic booms and reshaping global energy markets. The discovery of these reserves transformed cities, attracted investment, and altered the political and economic trajectory of the entire state. Infrastructure such as pipelines, refineries, and ports developed not because planners wanted them, but because geology demanded them. Texas grew outward toward national and international markets because the land anchored energy beneath it. 9. Texas has regions isolated by sheer distance. Some parts of Texas feel like islands. Remote towns in West Texas, the Panhandle, and along the border exist hundreds of miles from major metropolitan areas. Geography forces these communities to operate with a level of self-reliance that shapes culture, transportation, and daily life. Distance affects emergency services, supply chains, and even the kinds of businesses that can survive. In these regions, independence isn't a political slogan. It is a geographic necessity. Distance isn't empty here. It's defining. 8. Texas geography shaped cattle culture. Ranching wasn't a choice, it was a response. The combination of vast grasslands, limited rainfall, and wide-open terrain favored livestock over crop agriculture. Early settlers used open-range systems where cattle roamed freely across unfenced land, driving them long distances to railheads and markets. This created traditions, laws, and cultural norms that still influence Texas identity today. Branding, fencing disputes, cow towns, and long drives emerged not as cultural preferences, but as adaptations to terrain and climate. In Texas, cattle culture is geography, translated into economics and heritage. 7. Texas contains floodplains that constantly reshape cities. Rivers here don't stay put. Seasonal rainfall, tropical storms, and rapid runoff create floodplains that shift over time, forcing engineers to rethink drainage, reservoirs, and development patterns. Cities such as Houston exist in direct negotiation with water, relying on bayous, levees, and retention systems to prevent catastrophic flooding. These systems don't eliminate flood risk. They temporarily manage it. When Texas builds, it must build with water, not against it. Geography demands respect, and ignoring that reality has consequences. 6. Texas is positioned between major ecological migration routes. Millions pass through Texas without staying. Birds, butterflies, marine species, and larger wildlife use Texas as a seasonal crossing point between continents and climates. The Central Flyway, one of North America's major bird migration corridors, cuts directly through the state, while the Gulf Coast supports marine migrations and spawning cycles. This makes Texas a biological crossroads where ecosystems overlap temporarily before dispersing again. Movement shapes life here as much as climate or terrain. 5. Texas has natural borders and artificial ones, and they don't agree. Maps lie sometimes. Political boundaries drawn by legislators cut across natural regions defined by climate, soil, vegetation, and water. As a result, communities within the same state can belong to entirely different ecological zones, influencing how they farm, build, and live. This mismatch fuels regional identities such as West Texas, East Texas, Central Texas, the Panhandle, and the Gulf Coast, divisions that make cultural sense even if they don't appear on official maps. Texas isn't one geography, it's many forced together. 4. Texas contains some of the flattest land in the U.S. Flatness changes everything. In the Texas Panhandle and parts of West Texas, the land stretches outward with almost no elevation change, creating horizons that seem to go on forever. This flatness influences agriculture, wind patterns, transportation routes, and even human psychology. Railroads were built quickly across this terrain because the land required little grading, and modern highways follow similar logic. The absence of natural barriers allows wind to accelerate, enabling large-scale wind farms and shaping storm behavior. Out here, distance feels different. There's no forest to break the view, no mountain to block the sky. The landscape forces people to measure space not in miles, but in time. 3. Texas sits at the center of continental logistics. Geography turned Texas into a crossroads. Because Texas lies between the East and West coasts, between Mexico and the American interior, nearly every major mode of transportation crosses it. Highways such as I-10, I-20, I-35, and I-45 link coastal ports, border crossings, industrial hubs, and inland markets. Rail lines and pipelines move energy, freight, and supplies through the state, while international ports like Houston connect Texas to global shipping routes. Texas didn't become a logistics giant through ambition alone. Its position made it inevitable. Movement equals power, and Texas sits where movement converges. 2. Texas geography encourages independence by design. This wasn't accidental. From early settlement onward, Texans had to build systems locally because importing support was too slow, too distant, or too expensive. Harsh climate zones demanded irrigation. Sparse population required decentralized governance. Large ranches evolved because fencing small plots made no economic sense. Even today, Texas maintains its own electrical grid, a modern echo of geographic self-reliance. The environment didn't reward dependence, it punished it. Independence isn't just cultural in Texas, it is geographic survival. 1. Texas geography doesn't support scale, it demands it. This is the truth that ties everything together. The size, the distance, the resources, the climate. Texas didn't become big because people wanted it that way. It became big because the land required it. Infrastructure had to cover vast stretches of terrain. Industry had to expand to extract and move resources efficiently. Cities had to scale to command regional influence. Culture had to adapt to distance, weather, and self-reliance. Texas geography doesn't allow small solutions. It enforces ambition.